All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to this interactive poetry explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here with us today. We are going to completely decode Maya Angelou's legendary poem, Still I Rise. So if you're a literature student or really anyone gearing up for a big poetry exam, you are in the exact right place. We're going to break down the graphology, the themes, the structure, basically giving you the ultimate toolkit to ace your test. Okay, let's get into this absolute masterpiece.
Here is our game plan for today's study session. We've got 5 quick modules. First, the poet and the past. Then, defiant themes, symbols and imagery, rhythm and structure, and we'll wrap it all up with an exam review. So, kicking things off with Module 1, the poet and the past. Born Marguerite Annie Johnson back in 1928, Maya Angelou had to overcome a deeply, deeply traumatic childhood in the segregated American South. After a horrific event in her early years, she actually became entirely mute for 5 years. I really want you to just pause and think about that for a second. A woman who completely lost her voice for half a decade went on to become one of the most resonant, powerful global symbols of civil rights and literary brilliance. That incredible journey, from total silence to unapologetic expression, is literally the heartbeat of her poetry. The poem we're looking at was published in her 1978 collection, And Still I Rise. Now, it's deeply rooted in African American history, specifically tackling the very painful legacy of slavery and systemic anti-Black racism. But what makes this specific piece a true masterclass in literature is how it doubles as this uplifting, totally universal anthem. It's for absolutely anyone who has ever faced oppression. She takes a very specific historical trauma, and transforms it into a boundless declaration of human dignity. Moving right along to Module 2, Themes of Defiant Resilience. If you're taking notes right now, definitely write this down. The tone of this poem is not flat. It's not static at all. It shifts dramatically as you move through the lines. You can see this emotional journey playing out. Stanzas 1 through 6, they start with this highly confrontational, defiant challenge directed right at her oppressors. But then, when we hit stanza 7, it transforms. It becomes this deeply sensual celebration of self-love and femininity. And finally, stanzas 8 and 9 break out into this joyous, collective, and incredibly triumphant crescendo. Let's look a bit closer at exactly how she builds that defiant tone. Notice her use of rhetorical questions here. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? She is speaking directly to the oppressor, who she often just calls you in the text. By firing these questions at them, she's forcing the oppressor, and honestly us as readers too, to examine their own discomfort with her unwavering confidence. It is a brilliant psychological flip, right? She's basically making her joy the oppressor's problem. All right, let's dive into Module 3, Decoding Symbols and Imagery. Angelou is an absolute master at taking physical elements from nature and mapping them to these massive sociological concepts. This breakdown right here is pure gold for your study notes. So, dust represents inherent power because no matter how much you step on dust, it just rises back into the air. Oil wells pumping in her living room, that's unapologetic wealth and a bold claim to success. Diamonds at the meeting of her thighs represent inherent self-worth and unchanging beauty, directly challenging racist and sexist standards. And then there's the black ocean, which signifies this vast, totally unstoppable collective strength. I want us to look really closely at stanza 8. Throughout the earlier parts of the poem, she's using similes, right? She says she'll rise like dust or like moons. But right here, she makes a crucial pivot into a direct metaphor. She boldly declares, I'm a black ocean. This is huge. She is elevating her personal, individual struggle into a massive force of nature. In the context of Black American history, the ocean carries profound, heavy weight, evoking the tragic history of the transatlantic slave trade. But she reclaims that very ocean here, turning it into a source of immense, unstoppable life and power. Okay, let's keep the momentum going with Module 4, Rhythm, Structure, and Language. So a really critical point for your exams is the graphological analysis, meaning the actual visual shape of the poem on the page. Visually, those first 7 stanzas are tight, structured, 4-line quatrains. They follow a very strict rhythm, which perfectly reflects the rigid societal rules and constraints placed upon her. But look at what happens at the end. In the final 2 stanzas, she completely shatters that structure. She switches to uneven lines, repeating, I rise. She is literally breaking free from the physical constraints of the page, which mirrors the breaking of historical chains.
It's just such an incredible structural choice. Let's talk about the flow of the words. Angelou brilliantly uses a technique called enjambment. If you don't know that term, it's when a sentence flows smoothly right over the line break without any punctuation to make you pause. Listen to how this flows. Just like hopes springing high, still I'll rise. That creates this relentless, continuous forward momentum. It forces us as readers to just keep moving forward, perfectly mirroring her enduring, unstoppable spirit. She also leans into a technique called syncope. You'll spot this in words like "cause" instead of "because" and "diggin" instead of "digging." Now, why would a master poet do this? Well, it brings her authentic, colloquial voice right into the room with us. It actively rejects formal, stuffy, academic stiffness and completely embraces the vernacular. It makes the whole piece feel deeply personal, culturally grounded, and beautifully conversational. To pump up the musical rhythm of the piece, she peppers in consonants. A really great example of this is the repeating L sounds in the phrase welling and swelling. Try just whispering that out loud to yourself. You can literally hear the auditory representation of water moving. It drives the emotional weight of that ocean tide right into the reader's ear. Now, let's look at how she uses punctuation. Listen to the dramatic pauses, also known as caesuras, created by the commas in this specific line. But still, like dust, I'll rise. See, she doesn't let you just rush through it. The punctuation literally forces you to stop, take a physical breath, and acknowledge her absolute, unwavering determination. It adds this rhythmic tension that really highlights the central message of endurance. Make absolutely sure you add the term anaphora to your exam vocabulary list. This is simply the repetition of a word or phrase at the beginning of successive clauses. You see this heavily in stanza 6, with her repeated use of the phrase you may. You may shoot me, you may cut me, you may kill me. This repetition really emphasizes the relentless barrage of emotional and physical attacks she's facing down, while simultaneously highlighting her own rhythmic, unwavering defense against them. And all of that beautifully leads us to the poem's climax. The anaphora culminates in this incredibly powerful threefold repetition of I rise at the very end of the poem. It functions as this defiant, triumphant mantra. By repeating it over and over, she completely transcends her personal story to uplift entire communities. It is the ultimate linguistic realization of ancestral dreams. Oh, and quick pop quiz before we move to the final section. What was that term for the repeating consonant sounds we just learned? That's right, consonants. Keep that one fresh in your mind.
All right, we've made it to our final module, Module 5, the exam review and quiz. Here is your quick review cheat sheet. If you get an essay question on Maya Angelou, you want to make sure you hit these key points. Remember that she is defying both racial oppression and sexist societal constraints. Note how the poem masterfully transitions from a tone of intense personal defiance into one of collective, historical victory. Mention her brilliant use of natural imagery, like the dust, the moons, and the ocean, to prove that her power is inherent and natural. And definitely don't forget the graphology. Explain how breaking out of that four-line stanza form perfectly mirrors the breaking of historical chains. As we wrap up and you get ready to absolutely crush your exams, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to chew on. Ask yourself this: how exactly does Angelou use the image of that wide, leaping black ocean to bridge the gap between her own unapologetic self-worth and the profound shared historical trauma of her ancestors? Think about the pull of the tide. Think about the incredible depth. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. You guys are going to do great. Best of luck on those exams. You've totally got this.